That was a quick minute, but I think we should get started. Just one thing. If you do have any questions, please feel free to add those into the chat box or the Q&A. I'm going to do my best to take some time between each pro tier feature. So if there are any questions, we can address those. But again, we'll always save time at the end of the tutorial to go over, or the webinar, I should say, to go over any questions that maybe come up at the end, or if we need to go back to the platform, we can definitely do that. I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll go through the agenda today, and then we'll jump in. So as I'm doing that, so a lot of you may be currently on the pro tier and using this as an opportunity to learn more about the setup and how all of those pro tier features work, or you may be interested in upgrading to a pro tier license from the current license that you're using. Hopefully this is a very informative call for you, but you can always reach out to me afterwards if you wanted to schedule a follow-up call or have any questions that I can help with. We also have a pro tier write-up, which I can absolutely send you. It just really is a PDF that goes through all of the pro tier features and setup within your account and then the associated features. If you would like a copy of that, just let me know. So what we're going to be talking about today, just to give you a little idea of the agenda and how we're going to work through those features. The first thing we're going to talk about is advanced spec coding. Then we're going to jump into the spec library, how you can set that up, and then how you can also use our new feature vendor labels to have those associated with items in the library. Then we're going to jump into some multi-office setup as well as the role and permission setup. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the current Revit integration as well as the new release of the Revit integration that we will be dropping very, very shortly. Okay, so let's get started. Hopefully that will go down eventually. Perfect. Okay. So what we're going to talk about right now is the setup of the advanced spec coding. And what this feature does is it allows you to set up a default coding scheme that's specific to your project. So each project can have a different coding scheme. The standard scheme that is set up on your project when you first go in is the spec type code and number. So just to give you a little background on where you can set up your spec type code, you can go over to your pink spec type tab. So these are your account setup tabs. And the pink spec type tab is where all of your specification templates live. Now, as you're setting up your template, you're going to set up a code prefix so that when you're in a project on your specs list, or if you're looking at a report and you see a specification, you can quickly identify what that item is by their prefix. So CH is just going to represent all of my chairs. So if I don't have any images set up, but I need to identify what that item is, the code prefix is really great for providing you that information really quickly. So you can set up your code prefix with your template. Just one thing to point out while we're here is if you go into your template and you update the prefix at any time, that will not impact any of the specs that are currently in your projects. It'll just change the prefix for new specs moving forward. I also want to highlight another feature that you can set up with your advanced spec coding. You can use category number ranges. And so they're associated with your category options that are set up on your pink spec types tab. So if you go into manage categories, you're going to see that you can create custom categories in which you can then assign to your spec templates. When you click on the spec code number range area right beside your category, it'll prompt you to set in a number range. So if, for example, I go over to my seating, all of my seating specs, perhaps they are going to be chair with my seating category, but my code prefix is going to be used, and then this numbering system. So when I go to create a chair spec, my first chair is automatically going to be CH 100. And then my second one will be CH101. So really you're just going to set up your number range here so that when you go into your project, set up the default coding scheme, that all of these numbers are in place. And then when you create your spec, these are going to auto populate for you. So I just want to highlight that this is where your category number ranges are set up. So now we're going to go back into the project and select a coding scheme for our project. So when you go into the details, so your project details, you're going to have a little box if you scroll down called spec code settings. So when I go to my drop down menu, I'm going to see that I can change my scheme to have an area code, as well as my code prefix and a number. I can even switch it around and select the option to have an area code, my number in between, and then my code prefix. So if I want to use those category number ranges, I just have to select this option. And I can even go and just start my numbering system from 0, 1 to however many. And then I can also extend my digit length. So if I know that this is going to be a really long project, or if there's just a requirement for additional zeros or 4 digits, then I can set that up as well. One thing that I do want to mention is that if you come in here to your project details at any time and you change your coding scheme, again, you're not going to have any impact on any specs that are currently in your project. You're really just updating the scheme for any specs moving forward. And so I'm going to talk about the area code a little bit further when we go into the project. But right now I'm just going to set up a spec category number range with my scheme, and then I'm going to save it. If I were to have had an area code in my coding scheme, then I would need to have all of my areas set up first so that when I go to create a spec, actually I'm going to do that. So that when I go to create a spec, I'm first going to be prompted to select my area, and it will need to have an area code. And then I'm also going to need to select my spec template. So I've updated my coding scheme to have an area code and use category number ranges. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spec. And because I've set that scheme, it's going to now prompt me to pick out my area, and then I'm going to go to chair. So now my code is going to be my area code, my spec type prefix, and that category number range. So I'll just save this as chair, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create another one, and you'll see how my coding or my category number range updates. So if I go to chair, now it's going to be 101. So the nice thing is that it just sets up your code in the way that you need it, and you don't have to then go in and make any changes. A couple of things that I do like to mention with regards to your coding scheme. So you can set up multiple category number ranges that have the same number range. So if your accessories start at 100 and your plumbing fixtures start at 100, but your seating starts at 500, you can set up all of those specific to the category. The one thing I do just want to mention though, is that if you do have an area code, the area code that's going to be added for your spec code is going to be the area that's assigned to your item. So if you have an area grouping set up with sub areas, it's going to use the sub area code and not your area grouping code. We are going to be changing that so that you can have the option to select your area grouping or your sub area code. So that being said, there are some requirements when setting an area code in your coding scheme. So you can only assign one area to your specification, and only because the software is going to say, hey, we're using your BR2 code in your specs, so it doesn't make sense to set up another one. So if that is the case, what you can do is you can set up your area, and then you can go and change your coding scheme, and you can start adding multiple areas. It's really just to set up your items with that initial code. So again, we will be providing the option at some point. It's a feature that we're going to be adding so that you can choose whether it's your area grouping or your sub area code. But anytime you do add a second area, or if there's a discrepancy of some sort, then you'll be able to see a little message letting you know what's going on, and you may not even be able to save your specs. So just to let you know that those are some of the requirements, but that's what you can do. And then we also have some additional features with the advanced spec coding. So show you what those are. So if you are within your project and you want to duplicate your project so that you have two projects with all of the same codes, I'm just going to set it up like this way just because it's a little bit easier to have the default coding scheme. Anytime you want to customize the codes, the default coding scheme is the best option. But basically what you'll be able to do as you're copying items from one project to another is you'll be able to keep the same coding scheme. So if I select my new project name, why is it not letting me do that? Oh, of course. So I can try this again. If I copy it over to a new project, it should give me the option right now to set up a new coding scheme. So I can select maybe the same code, or I can set it up with a new code. Probably because I have my number ranges on. Turn that off. And then we'll go over here. So you should be prompted, we'll try that one more time, to set up a new coding scheme with the new project. Or what you can do is you can keep the same code, or you can even just keep the same number sequence, but have it put in order of the specs that are currently in there. So this is a part of the advanced spec coding feature. So you'll only see this if you do have the pro tier. Otherwise, it'll just give you the option to send it into the same or a new project, and then set up your area and your quantity by area. So that's the advanced spec coding feature. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the spec library features and setup. So I'm just going to go over to my spec library. You can get here at any time by just clicking on the spec library link at the top of the screen. When you first start your pro tier and you go to your spec library, you're going to notice that it's empty. So you have an option to either set up your library with specific curated items, or you can just copy absolutely everything from all of your projects into this library. So it can be A or B. We do have roles and permissions that are set up with the spec library. So if you'd only like certain people to have access to this library, we can set it up so that there are certain rules that people can view the library, and then certain rules where people can edit the library. So basically what you'll do is you'll go to your library. You can set up your specs within the libraries. You have all of the same elements of information that you can add in the library for your items as you can for when you're setting it up in your project. So if I just go into this item here, I'll see that I can add a description. I can also see a list of all the projects that I've added it to. And you can also capture multiple images as well as upload documents. So again, the same spec setup can happen in the library. And then what you can do is you can choose to send it into a project by going over to your projects tab. So as you're doing that, just select add to project. You can then select your project name. It'll show you what the code will be as you send it into that new project. So if you have your coding scheme set up to have an area code, it'll then prompt you to select your area, and then it'll provide you with that code. You can then also set up your spec stage as you're sending it in. So if you know that it's already been approved by your client, you can just send it in with that stage already set up. Another way you can start building your library is you can go into your project. You can select your items, and then you can copy them into your spec library. So you can select them and then select the copy button, and here you will see the option to send them into your library. So it'll let you know, hey, you're copying 3 specs over, and then you can go into your library and you can refresh your browser and you'll see all of those items. So here, I believe I just sent some over. Anyways, so once you sent them over into your library, they're there for you to send over. We also have some other filters. So if you wanted to perhaps see all of the items by one vendor, or if you just wanted to see all of the items for a certain spec type, it's a great sourcing tool for you to just use items across projects. So one of the advantages to the spec library, it's a great time saver to allow you to make updates on the global level. So if I go in and I receive perhaps a letter from, or an email, I should say, no one writes letters anymore, from your vendor letting you know that the SKU has changed, you can update that detail in the library. And then you can sync those changes, or that change, I should say, to all of the projects that have this spec. So it's a really great way to make one change on the global level. If you have an item, perhaps, or a project that has this item and it's maybe in the purchasing stages and you don't really need that detail to apply to that item, what you can do is there's two things. You can go into the projects tab for this item and you can unlink the project. And that will ensure that the item in this project does not receive that update. What we also have is an opportunity for you to set up a spec stage with a toggle so that, again, the item who has this state, or that has this stage applied, does not receive any syncing changes from the library. So those are two ways in which you can protect an item in a project so that it's not getting those global changes. And then there's one other thing I just want to touch on while we're going through the spec library. So you might have seen a newsletter that we released with regards to a feature that allows you to organize your vendors, or I should say label them. So what that feature is on your vendors tab, you're going to see a new labels tab. So here you can go and you can set up labels, which you can then assign to your vendors and manufacturers. So multiple labels can be set up and assigned to one contact. But it's a really great opportunity for you to perhaps, if you're dealing with hospitality brands or different project types, to even tag a vendor to be relevant towards a certain brand or project type. Some hotel brands require you to work with approved vendors. So this is a really great way to tag those items. And we also have a filter within the spec library so that you can access those items by those vendors. So you can set up the labels here. Each label can, like our spec stages, have an assigned color as well as a name. At any point, if you have assigned these to a vendor, you can archive the label if you don't want to see that anymore. And then you can also show any archived labels. But you'll go over to the vendors tab once you've created the label. And what you can do is you can select the vendor or vendors, and then you can go and you can assign the label. So just go to the label button, select your label. So I can select my plumbing label, and then I can add that to those vendors. You can even go in and select your items and then your label, and you can even create a label if you want. And then you can just select enter, and it'll automatically set up that label and add it to those vendors. So again, you can have multiple labels assigned to each vendor. Then when we go back to our spec library, what I can do is I can filter on my label so that I can see perhaps all of those items that have a vendor with this assigned label. So this is a newer feature. Again, feel free to go in and set those up and assign those to your vendors. You can even filter on the vendors tab by label as well. So a great way to source items or source vendors. And there we go. So that is our spec library feature. Next, we're going to go to the multi-office setup. And this is really straightforward. We're also going to return back to our vendor tab in just a moment. But to go to your company settings, you can click on this settings icon in the top right hand corner and then company settings. So for a account that doesn't have the pro tier set up, you'll be able to add in one office address. And you can then assign your office to your projects, or you can show your office address on any reports by setting up custom attributes, general office custom attributes. So your street, city, province, postal code. So for accounts with the pro tier, you'll be able to set up multiple offices. So you can just go in, set up the address and the location. You can always go in and remove any of those at any time. So what you're going to do after you've set up your office locations is you're going to go over to the users tab, and you're going to see here that we have an office column. So you're going to want to go and select the person that you're going to want to assign the office to. So this is an option for you to assign offices to users, and then what they can do is they can go over to the projects tab and they can set up their default office location, and then they'll only see the projects that are their office is assigned to. And so as you're setting up a project, you'll just go back into those project details and you'll assign your office to this project. And that way, when you go to create a report, if you have those general attributes set up on your cover page for your project office, those are automatically going to update for that project because you have the office assigned. So what you're also going to be able to do now that you have your multi offices set up is you can go in and you can set up a vendor, and then you can locate the representative to a specific office. So you'll go in, set up your vendor, and then you'll add all of the representatives that work with this vendor. And then on our representatives tab, we'll go into Don Johnson here, you'll see an offices assigned tab. So when you go in here, you'll be able to see, okay, Don Johnson, who do you represent? Because we know that a lot of companies with multiple offices can have them on the East Coast and West Coast or even overseas. So chances are that you're dealing with a different representative. So you can tag each representative to a specific office. And that way, when you're in your project and you're assigning a spec to your vendor, or you're assigning a vendor to your spec, the representative assigned to that office will populate. So I'm just going to actually switch my project office. So you can switch that at any time as well. And I'm going to return here when we start going through the project permissions. So I'll show you how you can assign specific people or an office to a certain project. So if we go over, actually we'll go to our specs tab. We can go in here and we can select our items, and then we can do our vendor manufacturer. And if I select my vendor name, then the rep assigned to my office should populate this box, and then any linked vendor as well. So that will also happen on the item level when you're in your spec and you're setting up your vendor with your rep. I already had one, so it didn't work. But we actually do have some features in place so that those will auto update whether you're doing it from your specs list or within your item if a vendor was already assigned. So that is the multi-office setup. Next, we're going to go into the roles and permissions. So I'm going to return to the project details and so show you how that links up to your office. But what we'll do is we'll go into our roles and permissions link. So a couple of things here is when you first go to set up your roles, you want to do that before you start assigning them to the users, and especially with the project permissions as well. and only because you don't want to invite someone to your account, and then they'll not have access to anything if you don't have the appropriate roles or office assigned so that they can access certain areas of the platform. So if we go over to our roles tab, you can click on any of the roles that we have set up. These can all be renamed, or you can use the current name. You can assign multiple roles to one or a number of users, only to ensure that they have the correct access. So, what these are really great at doing is this allows you the opportunity to set up your account with all of your company standards and defaults, but then hide certain areas of the platform. So, if I know that I'm going to have someone coming into my account who's perhaps collaborating or maybe an intern, I can set up a role so that they can only access the project tabs. And then if I only want them to be able to access a tab but not make any changes, I can set up um, the setting to view instead of edit. So to hide something, you just turn the toggle off, and then to provide them viewing access only, you just have to set up the drop down menu to edit or view. So anyone can set these up, and then you can start assigning them. Ideally, it would be someone who's more of the account manager role, or someone who is in need of accessing this information. So again, go through all of the permissions and just kind of see what tabs that they represent. We added a few new ones recently so that you can protect or hide the project files, the spec library, and even the label setup. And sometimes it's helpful to have less people who have access to these areas so that lots of different things are being set up. And again, it kind of gives a little bit more control for your account. We also have a spec stage setup and Revit setup, and then a Slack setup. So all of these pertaining to the spec, or sorry, the pro tier. The vendor label is a standard feature, just to point that out. So that's not a part of the pro tier, as well as the project files. So those are both standard, but again, the permissions to access those are part of the pro tier with regards to the rules. Okay, so once you've set up all of your roles, you can go over to your users tab. And this is where you're going to go to assign the rules. If you're inviting someone into your account, you're going to see that once you've enabled the roles, you can assign them one or multiple roles as you're inviting them in. Really, the setup is key. If you are starting the pro tier, people are already on your account. That is when you do need to assign the roles. So what you can do is you can click on the users. The account owner will always have access to all of the projects, but to assign roles, what you can do is select the user, assign roles, and then you can choose the roles that you'd like to assign. At any point in time, you can also come in here and you can remove roles. So any of the roles that are currently assigned will show here so that you can take those away if needed. And then there's also project permissions. So you're going to want to have, again, an office assigned to each user before you enable the project permissions. So if I go back to my users tab, you can see here that you can assign the office, which we just went through a second ago. And then what you'll do is you'll set up the project permissions. You can also go in, you can assign a certain user to have access to all projects. So just click on the three dots, and then you can remove an office, or you can grant access to all projects. If you're inviting someone to your account and you only want them to have access to one project, invite them, set them up with a role, and then once they're active on the account, you can go into the project. We'll go over here, we'll go into our project, and then you'll go back into those project details. And so if the office is assigned to the project, then anyone who has that office assigned will automatically be able to access this project. When you go over to the Access tab, That's going to allow you the option to add specific people to this project that maybe don't have this office assigned or have an office assigned at all. So you can add those people to the project so that they can come in and access the project information with that role assigned. So again, the ultimate level of protection for you to say, okay, I want you to come in and maybe write some specs, but you can't make any changes to my setup tabs, and you can only see this project. So the roles and permissions are great for that. All right, I'm just kind of zooming through all of these things. Actually, while I'm here, before we jump into the Revit, I do just want to highlight another feature that we added more recently. You might know about this, maybe not, but this is our feature called Project Files. I'm just going to go into a project that I have some files. So you'll go to your project overview tab and you'll see that we did change some of the tabs to be on the side here. And really that was an opportunity for the pages to load faster with less information. So before it was just one overview tab. Now we have a couple of different tabs on the left here. So the project files is an opportunity for you to upload files that are specific to this project. So any file type is supported here. It can be a image or it can be a PDF or an Excel. Each document can be previewed. So anyone who has access to the project files can come in, review the document by just clicking on it. So this is helpful for task charts, for client contracts if you want, any floor plans. And so once they're uploaded here, you can go and you can rename them, you can export them at any time, and then you can also share a link, which you can then copy and paste into an email to send off to anyone you'd like to share that document with. They don't need to have a license to view the document. They can just click on the link and see all of the information that you've selected from the document. All right, so that's our project files tab. Now we're going to go through the Revit integration. So as you're getting that started, you're going to see when we go to this dashboard drop-down menu, integrations is just at the bottom. So the QuickBooks integration is a standard feature on the platform, so anybody can access that. Also, just to let you know that we're working on setting up a tutorial video for the QuickBooks integration, so that's something that's also coming very soon. It's a great feature, it's highly utilized, but it can be a little bit tricky with the setup from DesignSpec to QuickBooks. We want to ensure that we're providing you with a lot of information. If you would like a document on that, again, just let me know and I'd be happy to send that over to you. So the beginning stages with the Revit integration is you'll first come into our Revit tab and you're going to see a number of their clickable boxes. Really what these are is these are a plugin for you to access DesignSpec within Revit. So you're going to download the plugin that matches the version of Revit that you're currently using. So you just have to click on the box and then it'll automatically upload the plugin. You can click on it and then it'll just prompt you to run it on your computer. So it is device specific. So then you can continue to add that to your computer and install. Then what you're going to do is you're going to go over to Revit and you're going to log in. I can show you all of the things, but for some reason, my Revit integration keeps kicking me out today. So I'm going to go through all the steps and then I have a video with all of the steps, which is actually a little bit of a more efficient way to see the integration. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what gets carried over, how this works. And then I'm going to introduce what's coming next, which we're super excited about. So what you'll do is you'll log into your Revit and then you'll go over to, there's a little add-ins button. So it's just going to take a second to open. So you'll select your project and then you'll see that add-ins button right up here at the top. And when you select the add-ons button, you'll see the DesignSpec logo after you have that plugin set up and installed. Anyways, okay, so we go over to add-ins, and here is our design spec sync. So you'll be able to sign into your design spec account. And so then it'll ask you to select your project from design spec. So I'm just going to go into our tutorial video here. And so basically, I'm just going to kind of talk you through the steps and how this is working. So you'll log in, you'll select your project, and then you'll go over to the add-ons or add-ins, and then you'll log into your design spec account. You'll see a little bar at the top of the screen. This is just going through all of the steps involved. So once you've linked your project, you're going to see all of your product family perimeters, so your custom attributes. So you're going to, if you have a value filled out for those, then you'll be able to select what you want to match them to as a custom attribute in design spec. And then it'll bring you over into your categories and your product families. So any product families or categories will be listed just at the bottom. So you can click on the plus sign to include them in that mapping process. And then what you'll see here is there's a filter. So this filter will be able to show you, what's mapped, what hasn't been mapped. You can also reset the mapping settings here by clicking on this button. And you can even do a quick search for a product family. But what you'll do for your product families is that you'll match the spec type that you have set up in design spec so that when you import that information into your DS account, it'll be using that spec template. So if, for example, you have door setup is a product family in Revit, you can then map it to perhaps interior finish or any other, or maybe a wood finish or something like that, whatever you have set up in design spec. So it does give you a little bit of flexibility to choose how it's coming into your account. You do need to have a type mark value set up so that your categories and your product families will show in the mapping window here. And so really just to go over the information that's going from Revit into design spec currently with the integration is your type mark will be your spec code, which then is imported into design spec, as well as the description. Also, your quantity is going to be imported into the general quantity area. Actually, I'm just going to show you in design spec. So the quantity is going to go into your general quantity area. And really that's going to be added to your spec based on how many times that item has been added to your Revit model. Also your perimeters, so your custom attributes, those are also going to map over. So that's all the information that's going over now. If you keep your type mark, your code, and your description the same and don't change those in design spec, you can push information over again from Revit into design spec if you've updated parameters in your Revit model. So that will update your design spec account or the spec within your design spec account. So again, it's project specific, so everything from project to project. We introduced the integration and we got a lot of feedback, and we learned that a lot of people have a different workflow. So essentially they like to push information over from Revit to design spec, but then the workflow is to work in design spec, update their items here, and then push that information back to their Revit model. So that being said, we do have a second integration or a second release of the integration that we're going to be introducing very, very soon. So hopefully within the next 2 weeks, you'll receive a newsletter letting you know when we've introduced it. If you are interested, I'd be happy to show a little tutorial video or a little demo on how that's working. And I can just kind of talk through it a little bit. So again, you can choose which way you want to sync. So you'll link your projects, and then it's really the same sort of process, but it's a little bit more well-rounded in that you can bring over more information from Revit to DesignSpec, and then you can also send information over back into Revit to update items in your Revit model. So what you're seeing right now is you can choose to bring over areas from Revit into DesignSpec. You can choose to map those to a current area that you have set up. And then all the items will have that area assigned as they're brought in. So you can map areas over as an area or as a sub area. So there's some flexibility to do that, which is exciting. So you'll just select sub area under the current area name. So what you're seeing right now is some areas that have been mapped over as a sub area. So stairs 1, 2, 3, that was just on the example that was shown in the demo. Next, you'll go through the same process of selecting your product families and then matching those to a spec type in DesignSpec. So going back over here. So right now that information is just mapping over, and then you'll do the sync. So anytime you are pushing information over from Revit into DesignSpec and you have your DS account open, it's kind of the same as using your web clipper. Just always go in, refresh your browser so that you can see that newly added information. Might take a minute or two if it's a lot of information that's transferring. So again, you're seeing now the example of changing or adding information in DesignSpec and then pushing that over. So vendor information can also get carried over. So actually, I'll tell you all of the information that will get carried over. So again, similar to the first integration, there'll be type mark, description, quantity. Now you can carry over if it's an architectural or an FF&E item, the category that's assigned. You can also bring over the furnished installed by spec stage. That's a new detail that can now be brought over. Summary notes, website, vendor rep, and manufacturer, as well as the areas and again, the perimeters or the attributes. So a lot more information can be exchanged. We're super excited about this. So just to kind of give you an update, we're going to have a demo video available as well as some written documentation. So when we do send out the newsletter, you'll know that it's available on the platform. We're going to give a little summary on how it works, but for more information, just let us know and we'll send you anything that we have and direct you towards the tutorial. It may not be on our YouTube page just yet, but we'll get it there as quick as possible, but we would be happy to send it to you. So right now it's just kind of comparing, what's in DesignSpec, what you're pushing over to Revit. So again, the mapping window is just going to provide a lot more information, and you can choose if you want to sync it, what you want to sync, which is nice. So again, a little bit more control over the information exchange. We can open it up to any questions. I apologize. I just realized that I didn't pause between each feature, but we do have 15 minutes, so happy to go over questions. Apologize if I don't have the answers for you when it comes to the new Revit integration, but I can absolutely get those for you, or we can have the conversation outside of the call. So Carlos, do we have any questions? Have people been sending anything into the chat?
Yes, so we have a few questions. So the first one is there a way to change your spec category number to start at 1 without the 0, or will it always have to start at 0, 1?
Oh, so that, yes. So yes, you can set up the category number ranges so that they're 1. The tricky thing with that is that the platform. So see here, I have this set up as 1. So what I'll do is I'll go and I'll show you what that looks like when we create a spec. The tricky thing is that the software reads your codes. So if you do, say this is a banquette and you do 1, and then you go and you add your 11th banquet, it will put that 11th banquet before your second banquet because it's reading the numbers as it's consecutively shown. So if you do want your, single numbers to be shown at the top and then your double digits to be shown below, you do have to add a 0 in front of it. We are going to look to change that, but right now that's just kind of the way that it works in with regards to the setup. So I'll just save that. We'll go over to my project and I'll just create a spec. So you'll see that it does start off at sometimes it's not when you know the software, you can kind of move too fast and then you miss things, but I'll try and slow that down. So we have our category number ranges set. We'll go over here and I'm going to create a banquet. Oh, it started at 0, 1. That was a bit of a mystery to me. So yeah, it does do the 0, 1. You can remove it, you can save it. But again, when you go to start setting up those double digit ones, it'll put them with the 1 instead of having it after the 9. Long-winded answer for that one. Anyways, any other questions there, Carlos? Just drop them in.
Yeah, there's another question. So this one is, are there any plans to incorporate with Chief Architect?
Interesting. That's the first time anyone's ever asked that. So definitely something for us to look into if you want to send us any other details with regards to that. Integrations do take a little bit more time to create and develop, but that being said, if it's something that people are consistently requesting, it puts it on our map, puts it on our radar, and then we do our best to get it into development when the right time comes. So I'm just going to make a little note of that. And also just to note, if you're interested in starting a trial of the pro tier, if you've already used the one that was available on your account, you just want to have access to another one just to kind of go in and play around and see if it's something that would work for your company, feel free to reach out to support or myself and we can set that up on your account so that you can have some time and feel out if it's right for you. And if you are wanting to go and change your account over, what you can do is just, there'll be your billing tab here. So just go over to your billing tab. You can change your license to a pro tier. So whether it's the Studio Pro tier or the Complete Pro tier, all of the features are the same. The only additional feature with the Complete Pro tier is the option to send an RFQ directly to your vendor from the vendor bidding tab. So really right now, that's the only difference for the Pro tier. And obviously I picked a project where I don't have any, but really it's when you're setting up your RFQ, you just go in and it'll just say send directly to vendor or just create it. So I should have pointed that out earlier, but that's really the one procurement difference at this time. But you can go and also the license changes to your account are prorated. So if you want to just try it out for maybe 3 months, you can upgrade to Pro tier for 3 months, and then you can always downgrade back to the standard license, and then you'll receive a credit if there's any unused time for that change. So just know that that's available to you if you want to try it out in that way.
And we have one more question. And it is there a way to access the vendor list without going into a project?
It's a great question. It is a global tab on the project level. Um, I think the goal for us is to have it set up as a global tab. Right now, it's just a little bit tricky because it's on the project level. So eventually we're going to get it there. But right now you do have to go into a project to access your vendors tab.
Oh, sorry, and another question came in. It is what happens to the interface with Revit if you change a quantity in design spec but not in the drawing?
That is a good question. I don't think that that actually maps back to Revit, and only because you've added the item to your Revit model. And also, one thing to point out with the quantities too, if the item is not added correctly to the area, that it also won't calculate that as you're pushing it to DS. So the information that does changes back on the sync is more so the vendor, the custom attributes, and then any of those summary notes or other details. But I think the quantity is based on how it's added to your Revit model. So that would not update. And the areas actually don't update as well if you change them. Because again, the item is added to the area within the Revit model. So those are the two things that don't change.
And that's it, I believe. If anyone has any last second questions they want to ask, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A.
Awesome. Looks like we answered all the questions, Carlos. But if anything does pop up, again, you can email myself or support, and the email should be going out relatively soon with the recording for this call, as well as any additional information. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to answer those or get on a call, but keep an eye out for our newsletter for that second release of the Revit integration. And if you're not on Pro Tier and you want to test it out, also just let us know. So just gonna stop the share. Awesome.